Commander Marcus Chen had been a prisoner for 18 months. The Verthani called him a diplomatic guest, but everyone knew the truth. He was a hostage, a specimen, curiosity kept in a comfortable cage aboard the largest ship he had ever seen. The Verthani were terrifying creatures. They stood 7 feet tall, with bodies like giant mantises. Their skin was hard like armor and shined with colors that changed in the light. Their eyes were made of thousands of tiny parts that seemed to see everything at once. They had ruled 1,000 star systems for 3,000 years. And they viewed humans the way humans viewed clever pets. Marcus had learned their language during his captivity. He had memorized the layout of the ship during his supervised walks. He had watched and waited and planned, though he never knew what he was planning for. Rescue seemed impossible. Earth's small fleet of ships could never reach this deep into Verthani space. He was alone, millions of light years from home, surrounded by aliens who thought his entire species was barely worth noticing. Then everything changed in a single moment. The ship shook so hard that Marcus fell against the wall of his quarters. Alarms screamed in sounds that hurt his ears. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. His 2 guards, who never left his side, looked at each other with what Marcus had learned to recognize as fear. One of them spoke rapidly into a communication device. The response made both guards click their mandibles in alarm. Without a word to Marcus, they ran down the corridor toward whatever emergency had erupted. For the first time in 18 months, Marcus was alone. He did not hesitate. He pushed open his door and ran in the opposite direction from his guards. His heart pounded against his ribs. His bare feet slapped against the cold metal floor. He had no weapon, no plan, and no idea what was happening. But he was free, and he would not waste this chance. Marcus did not run toward the escape pods. He knew he would never make it that far. Instead, he moved toward the communications array he had spent months secretly locating. If he could send a message to Earth, if he could warn them about the Verthani fleet positions, his capture might mean something. The ship shook again. Marcus stumbled and grabbed a wall to keep from falling. He heard footsteps ahead, the distinctive clicking sound of Verthani soldiers running. He looked around desperately for somewhere to hide. There was a door to his left. It had no markings, no signs, nothing to indicate what lay beyond. Marcus did not care. He pressed his hand against the panel, and the door slid open. He threw himself inside as the soldiers ran past. The door closed behind him. And Marcus found himself in a room unlike anything he had seen on the ship. It was enormous. The walls were not metal, but something organic, something alive. They pulsed with soft blue and green light like a heartbeat. Strange plants grew from surfaces that seemed to breathe. The air smelled sweet and heavy like flowers after rain. Everything about the room felt ancient and sacred, like a temple or a tomb. Marcus walked forward slowly, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The room was circular, and at its center stood a raised platform covered in what looked like offerings. Gold objects, strange crystals, pieces of technology he could not identify. And lying among these treasures, surrounded by dead attendants, was the largest Verthani Marcus had ever seen. The Queen. He knew it immediately. Every Verthani he had met spoke of their queen with something like religious devotion. She was the mother of their species, the keeper of their history, the heart of their empire. And she was dying. Black blood leaked from terrible wounds across her chest. Her breathing was shallow and wet. Her compound eyes, each one larger than Marcus's head, were dim and unfocused. Around her lay the bodies of her attendants, killed by whatever attack had struck the ship, but the Queen was not alone. Standing over her with a weapon, raised for the killing blow, was something that was definitely not Verthani. The creature was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Its limbs had too many joints. Its eyes were completely black, like holes cut into reality itself. It moved with a grace that seemed wrong, unnatural. Like a nightmare given physical form, the creature had not noticed Marcus yet. It was focused entirely on the Queen, savoring the moment before the kill. Marcus understood what was happening. This was an assassination. Someone had sent this thing to murder the Verthani queen during whatever chaos had struck the ship, and in a few seconds, it would succeed. His mind raced through the options. He could stay hidden. He could let this happen. The queen's death would throw the Verthani Empire into chaos. Her children would fight each other for power. The alien civilization that had captured him and threatened his home would tear itself apart. Humanity would be safe. It was the logical choice. It was the smart choice. Marcus looked at the queen's eyes. Even through her pain, even through her fading consciousness, he saw something he recognized. He saw fear. Pure, desperate, helpless fear. The same fear he had seen in the eyes of wounded soldiers on a dozen battlefields. The same fear he had felt himself when the Verthani captured his ship. She was a person. A dying person who could not defend herself. And someone was about to murder her while she lay helpless. Marcus had been a soldier before he became a prisoner. He had made a promise to himself long ago about the kind of man he would be. He had promised to protect those who could not protect themselves, no matter who they were, no matter what it cost. He was still that man. Marcus saw a fallen guard nearby. The guard's weapon was gone, but a ceremonial blade lay beside the body. It was more decoration than weapon, covered in jewels and gold, but it had an edge. Marcus picked it up. It felt light in his hand, almost fragile. The silver creature raised its weapon. The queen closed her eyes. Marcus charged. He covered the distance in 3 heartbeats. The creature began to turn, its black eyes widening in surprise. It had not expected anything so small, so weak, so utterly outmatched to attack it. That surprise gave Marcus the only advantage he would ever have. He aimed for the neck. The blade found a gap between the creature's metal plates. He pushed with everything he had, driving the ceremonial weapon deep into silver flesh. The creature screamed. The sound was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. A frequency that shattered crystals throughout the room and seemed to vibrate in his bones. A limb struck him across the chest and sent him flying. He hit the far wall with a crack that he felt more than heard. Pain exploded through his body as ribs broke, but through the pain, through the darkness creeping at the edges of his vision, Marcus saw the silver creature collapse. Its black eyes dimmed and went dark. The assassin was dead. He had done it. Marcus lay against the wall, struggling to breathe, and wondered if he had just made the best or worst decision of his life. Marcus tried to breathe, but each breath felt like knives cutting into his chest. His broken ribs screamed with pain. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead into his eyes. The ceremonial blade had fallen somewhere in the darkness, and he lacked the strength to look for it. The queen was watching him. She had pulled herself up slightly on her platform, her massive body trembling with the effort. Her compound eyes, each one containing thousands of tiny lenses, were focused entirely on the small human creature lying broken against her chamber wall. When she spoke, her voice was weak but clear, and she spoke in his language, not hers. "You are the human prisoner," Marcus coughed. It hurt terribly. "Yes, you saved me." "Yes, why?" It was such a simple question. Marcus could have given her a dozen answers. He could have lied and claimed he wanted a reward. He could have pretended he was working for some faction within her empire. He could have invented a strategic reason that made sense. Instead, he told her the truth, because you were afraid, and because someone was going to kill you while you could not fight back. He tried to shrug, but the movement made him gasp in pain. "I do not like bullies." The queen stared at him. 18 months of living among the Verthani had taught Marcus to read some of their expressions. But he could not understand what he saw in her eyes now. Confusion, perhaps, or something deeper. Then she made a sound he had never heard from any Verthani. A low, resonant humming that seemed to vibrate in his chest, even through the pain. It took him a moment to realize what it was. She was laughing. 18 months I have watched your kind through reports from my scientists, she said. Her voice was growing stronger, though her wounds still leaked black blood. I believed I understood humans. Weak bodies. Short lives. Ruled by emotions instead of logic. Interesting to study, but ultimately insignificant. Her massive head tilted to one side. I was wrong. You are something else entirely. Get that a lot, Marcus said. He was trying to stay conscious. The darkness kept creeping closer. Before the Queen could respond, the chamber doors exploded inward. Marcus flinched, expecting more assassins. But the creatures that poured into the room were Verthani soldiers. Their armor gleaming, their weapons raised and ready. They saw their queen, wounded and bleeding on her sacred platform. They saw the bodies of her attendants scattered across the floor. They saw the dead silver creature. And they saw a human standing over all of it, covered in blood, with a blade lying near his feet. They raised their weapons at Marcus. Wait. The Queen's voice cracked like thunder through the chamber. Every soldier froze instantly. This human saved my life. The soldiers did not lower their weapons, but they did not fire either. Their eyes moved between Marcus and their queen, trying to understand what they were seeing. The Cathari silence sent assassins, the Queen continued. This creature killed one of them. With a ceremonial blade, while unarmed and wounded, while having every reason to let me die, Marcus watched the soldiers exchange looks. Their mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of confusion or disbelief. He understood their reaction. Nothing about this situation made sense to them. Prisoners did not save their captors. Weak species did not kill Cathari assassins. The universe did not work this way. Summon the Brood Council, the Queen commanded. Her voice was growing stronger with each word, fueled by something Marcus could not identify. Bring the human our finest medical care, and bring the body of the assassin. My advisors will want to examine it. One of the soldiers stepped forward. He was larger than the others, his armor decorated with symbols of rank. My queen, this human is a prisoner of war. He cannot be treated as a guest. The law is clear, then the law will change. The Queen's compound eyes flashed with something dangerous. I am the law, General. Or have you forgotten? The general lowered his head. No, my queen, I have not forgotten. Good, now do as I command. The soldiers moved with perfect efficiency. Some surrounded Marcus, though they no longer pointed their weapons at him. Others rushed to their queen's side, producing medical equipment from their armor. Still others began examining the assassin's body, clicking to each other in rapid conversation. Marcus felt gentle limbs lift him from the floor. The pain in his ribs flared, and he groaned. A soldier produced a small device and pressed it against his neck. Cool relief flooded through his body as the alien medicine began its work. You will be taken to our medical bay, a soldier informed him. His voice was stiff and formal, but not hostile. The Queen has declared you a protected guest. You will receive the finest care we can offer. Thank you, Marcus managed to say. The soldier made a strange clicking sound that Marcus did not recognize. Later, he would learn it was a sound of grudging respect. Do not thank me, human. Thank the Queen, though I do not understand why she has chosen to spare you. Neither do I, Marcus admitted. They carried him through corridors filled with chaos. The ship was still dealing with whatever attack had created this opportunity for assassination. Soldiers ran in every direction. Alarms continued to wail. Damaged sections of the ship vented atmosphere into the void of space. But Marcus barely noticed any of it. His mind kept returning to the Queen's eyes, to the laughter he had heard, to the words she had spoken. I was wrong, she had said. You are something else entirely. What did that mean? What had she seen in him that surprised her so much? The medical bay was vast and filled with technology Marcus could not begin to understand. Machines hummed and glowed. Screens displayed information in the Verthani script. Doctors moved between patients with swift precision, their multiple limbs performing complex procedures simultaneously. They placed Marcus on a bed that molded itself to his body. Scanners passed over him, reading his injuries. The doctors clicked to each other, their compound eyes studying the results. 3 broken ribs, one announced in accented but understandable English. Internal bleeding, concussion, significant tissue damage. The doctor paused. You should be dead, human. That creature should have killed you instantly. Sorry to disappoint, Marcus said. The doctor made that clicking sound again. the one that meant grudging respect. Do not apologize. It is impressive. Foolish, but impressive. They worked on him for hours. The alien medicine was miraculous, healing injuries that would have taken months on Earth in mere hours. But even as his body healed, Marcus could not stop thinking about what had happened. He had saved the queen of an empire that had imprisoned him. He had killed an assassin from a species he had never seen before. And somehow, impossibly, he had survived. More importantly, something had changed. He had seen it in the queen's eyes. He had heard it in her voice. She had looked at him not as a prisoner, not as a specimen, not as a clever pet. She had looked at him as something else, as he drifted into healing sleep. Marcus wondered what that meant for him, for humanity, and for the galaxy itself. He would find out soon enough. 3 days after the assassination attempt, the queen summoned Marcus to her war room. His body had healed completely thanks to Verthani medicine. The broken ribs were whole again. The cuts had closed without scars. Even the headaches from the concussion had faded. He felt better than he had in months. Though a part of him still expected to wake up and find this was all a dream, 2 soldiers escorted him through the ship. They walked beside him now, not behind him. They did not hold his arms or point weapons at his back. The change was subtle, but meaningful. He was still not free, but he was no longer a prisoner in the same way he had been before. The war room was located at the heart of the ship, behind doors that required 3 different security codes to open. Inside, holographic displays filled the air with maps and data. Screens showed fleet positions across hundreds of star systems. The scale of the Verthani Empire took Marcus's breath away. Even though he had known intellectually how large it was, Queen Zyrthanvik stood at the center of the room. Her wounds healed, her armor gleaming. She looked powerful and ancient and dangerous. But when she turned to face Marcus, her compound eyes held something that did not match her fearsome appearance. They held exhaustion, and something that looked almost like hope. "Leave us," she commanded her guards. The soldiers hesitated. Leaving their queen alone with an alien, even one who had saved her life, went against every protocol they had ever learned. Said, "Leave us." They left. Marcus stood alone with the most powerful being in 1,000 star systems, and he had absolutely no idea what to say. "What I am about to tell you," the queen began, "has been the most closely guarded secret of the Verthani Empire for 3,000 years. I am telling you because you earned the right to know, and because I believe you may be the only one who can help me." Marcus said nothing. He simply waited. "We are not conquerors by nature," the queen said. "We did not build this empire because we wanted power. We built it because we were running away." She touched one of the holographic displays, and the star map changed. It zoomed out, showing regions of space far beyond Verthani territory. Vast stretches of the map were marked in black. 3,000 years ago, my people lived on a beautiful world called Verthan Prime. We were peaceful then. We studied science and art. We built great cities. We dreamed of exploring the stars and meeting other species. Her voice grew heavy. Then the Cathari silence found us. Marcus recognized the name. The Cathari silence was what the queen had called the Assassin's Masters. The silence is not an empire like ours. It is not a species in the way humans or Verthani are species. It is a collective intelligence, a single mind spread across millions of bodies. Moving from star system to star system with one purpose, she paused. Erasure. Erasure. They do not conquer. They do not enslave. They simply remove. Entire civilizations vanish when the silence arrives. Worlds are stripped clean. Every trace of the species that lived there is destroyed, not defeated, not absorbed, erased, as if they never existed at all. Marcus felt cold despite the warm air of the war room. Why? We do not know. In 3,000 years, we have never understood their motivation. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They do not stop. The queen's voice dropped to a whisper. They came to Verthan Prime and began their work. We barely escaped. A tiny fraction of our population fled into the stars while our homeworld burned behind us. She gestured at the holographic map, at the vast territory marked with Verthani symbols. This empire you see was built by refugees. Desperate, terrified refugees who swore they would never be helpless again. So you conquered others before they could conquer you, Marcus said. He understood the logic, even if he did not agree with it. Yes, we became strong. We became feared. We crushed anyone who might threaten us. The Queen made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. We became exactly what we fled. The strong preying on the weak. Dominators instead of partners. It was easier than remembering what we had lost. Easier than facing our fear. You built an empire on fear. Yes, and now that empire is rotting from within. She pulled up new displays showing internal reports. Marcus could not read Verthani's script well, but he recognized the patterns of unrest, protests, rebellions, generals plotting against each other. My people are tired. They have been afraid for so long that they have forgotten how to be anything else. The warrior casts schemes for power. The colonies grow resentful. Every faction sees every other faction as a threat. Marcus studied the information, his military training, analyzing the patterns. You are falling apart. Slowly, yes. But that process has just accelerated dramatically. The Queen pointed at a section of the map marked in red. The silence has found us again. After 3,000 years of running, they have located the Verthani Empire. The assassin you killed was a herald, sent to create chaos before the main attack arrives. How long? 2 cycles. Approximately 4 of your months. The Queen's voice was flat, stating facts that spelled doom. And my fractured. Fearful empire cannot stand against them. Not as we are now. Marcus looked at the displays for a long time. He thought about his home, about Earth, about humanity's small fleet of ships exploring the edges of known space. He thought about the 18 months he had spent as a prisoner, hating the Verthani, dreaming of their downfall. Now he understood that their downfall would mean the silence would keep spreading. More species would be erased. Eventually, the silence would find Earth. Why are you telling me this? He asked finally. Because I watched you charge an enemy you could not defeat to save someone who had imprisoned you, because you believed it was right. The Queen turned to face him fully. I am asking you to teach my people how to do that. To do what? To fight not from fear, but from something else. Something I saw in your eyes in my chamber. Something I have observed in your species' history and behavior. Something the Verthani have forgotten how to feel. Marcus thought about her words. He thought about his own people, their history of war and peace, their capacity for both terrible cruelty and incredible kindness. He thought about what made humans keep fighting when all hope seemed lost. Hope, he said quietly. You are talking about hope. Yes. The Queen's voice was barely a whisper. I am asking you to teach an empire how to hope again. I am asking you to help me save my people from their fear before the fear destroys us. And what do I get in return? The Queen straightened to her full height, towering over the human who had saved her life. In return, I will give humanity something the Verthani have never offered any species in 3,000 years. What? True alliance. Not as subjects. Not as servants. As equals, her compound eyes seemed to glow in the dim light of the war room. Because I believe your strange, emotional, illogical species may be exactly what the galaxy needs to survive what is coming. Marcus looked at the map showing the approach of the silence. He looked at the data showing an empire tearing itself apart. He looked at the Queen who had imprisoned him, who had treated his people as barely worth noticing, who was now asking for his help. It was insane. It was impossible. It went against every rule of common sense and self-preservation. He smiled. All right. Let us get to work. The Brood Council believed their queen had lost her mind. A human advisor? A human teaching Verthani warriors? The idea was so absurd that several council members made sounds of outrage that echoed through the great chamber. General Crixvon, the largest and most decorated soldier in the Empire, slammed his armored fist against the table. This is insanity, he declared. We are the dominant species in this region of space. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. And you want us to learn from a creature we could crush with one limb? Queen Xyrthanvix let them rage. She let them complain and protest, and list every reason why her plan was foolish. Then, when they had exhausted themselves, she activated the display screen at the center of the chamber. The recording showed the assassin standing over her wounded body. It showed a small human creature, barely half the size of any Verthani, charging across the room with nothing but a decorative blade. It showed the assassin dying in 4 seconds. The chamber fell silent. That creature, the queen said calmly, has killed 17 of our elite guards across 6 assassination attempts. Our best warriors, trained since birth in combat, could not defeat it. She pointed at the frozen image of Marcus. This human, unarmed and wounded, killed it in 4 seconds with an ornamental blade. General Crixfon's mandibles clicked uncertainly. It was luck. A momentary advantage? No, it was something else. Something we need to understand. The queen turned to face her council. We have spent 3,000 years measuring other species against ourselves. Comparing their strength to ours, their technology to ours, their armies to ours. We failed to ask what they might measure that we do not. The next day, Marcus stood before the full brood council. 50 of the most powerful Verthani in the Empire watched him with compound eyes that showed confusion, hostility, and reluctant curiosity. He did not lecture them. He told them stories. There was a battle on my world, Marcus began, thousands of years ago. A small group of soldiers, only 300 of them, faced an army of over 100,000 enemies. The soldiers knew they could not win. They knew they would die. But they fought anyway. The council members exchanged glances. Why? One asked. If victory was impossible, why not retreat? Why not surrender? Because by fighting, they gave their people time. Time to prepare defenses. Time to gather armies. Time to survive. Marcus paused. All 300 soldiers died. But because they stood and fought, their civilization survived. We still tell stories about them 3,000 years later. General Crixfon leaned forward. This is strategy. Sacrifice for strategic advantage. We understand this concept, do you? Marcus asked. Because the soldiers did not know if their sacrifice would work. They did not have calculations showing their deaths would save their people. They simply believed it might. And they chose to die for that belief. The general had no response. Marcus told them another story. During one of our world wars, soldiers from opposite sides were killing each other in frozen trenches. They had been fighting for months. They hated each other. Then, on a holiday, something strange happened. They stopped fighting. They climbed out of their trenches and met in the middle of the battlefield. They exchanged gifts. They sang songs together. They played games. For one day, enemies became friends. And then, a council member asked. Then the holiday ended. They went back to their trenches and continued killing each other. The chamber was completely silent. Every Verthani was staring at Marcus with an expression he could not read. I do not understand, General Crixfon said finally. Why would they do this? What possible purpose could such behavior serve? No purpose, Marcus admitted. It made no strategic sense. It did not change the outcome of the war. It was completely illogical, he smiled. But it reminded them that the enemies they were killing were people too. It reminded them of their own humanity, even in the middle of horror. Sometimes that matters more than logic. He told them a third story. 50 years ago, my species sent a small machine into space. We attached to it a golden disc containing music from our world, greetings in many languages, images of our planet and our people. We sent it into the vast emptiness between stars, hoping that someday someone would find it. To what end? The queen asked softly. She had been silent throughout his presentation, watching him with intense focus. To say hello. To prove we existed. To reach out to whatever might be listening, even though we knew we would probably never receive a response. Marcus shrugged. We knew that whatever found it might be hostile. We knew they might use it to locate us and attack us. We did it anyway. That is insane, General Crixfon said flatly. You announced your location to unknown entities. You invited attack, Invited contact, Marcus corrected. We hoped. Hope is not a strategy, but it is the thing that makes strategy worth having. Marcus activated his own display, crude by Verthani standards, but effective. You want to know how humans survive? We are not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the fastest, but we believe, despite all evidence, that tomorrow can be better than today. We fight wars we cannot win because surrender is unthinkable. We love things we know we will lose because the loving matters more than the keeping. He looked at the Queen. You built an empire on fear. Fear is an excellent motivator for survival, but the silence does not want to defeat you. It wants to erase you. Fear will not work against something that vast, that patient. You cannot outrun extinction. Then what do you suggest? The Queen's voice was carefully neutral, but Marcus could hear something beneath it. Something desperate. Stop running. Stop conquering. Stop being alone. Marcus took a deep breath. Send a message to every species you have conquered. Tell them the truth about the silence. Tell them you were wrong. Ask for alliance against a common enemy. The council erupted. Admit weakness? Apologize to inferior species. It went against everything the Verthani had built. Everything they believed about strength and survival. General Crixvon rose to his full height, towering over Marcus like a mountain of armored fury. You ask us to show weakness to those who would destroy us the moment they sensed an opportunity. I ask you to show trust, Marcus replied calmly. Yes, some will see it as weakness. Some will try to take advantage. But others will see it as hope. Others will remember their own fears and their own losses. Others will choose to stand with you instead of against you. And if the majority choose revenge, then you die fighting beside new friends instead of dying alone and afraid. Marcus met the general's compound eyes without flinching. That is the thing about hope, General. It requires trust. And trust has to start somewhere. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Queen Zerthan Vic spoke. 3,000 years ago, we were a species that dreamed of meeting others, of sharing the stars, of building something together. Fear made us forget those dreams. Fear turned us into conquerors. She stood, her massive form commanding the attention of every being in the room. Perhaps it is time to remember who we were before we learned to be afraid. She turned to face her council. We will send the message. We will tell the truth. We will ask for help. Her compound eyes swept across the room, daring anyone to argue. And we will see if the galaxy remembers how to hope. No one argued. Marcus felt something shift in that moment. Something ancient and heavy beginning to move. He did not know if his plan would work. He did not know if hope was enough to save an empire or a galaxy, or anything at all. But for the first time since his capture, he believed it might be. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the bridge of a ship that should not exist. The Dawn Alliance was crewed by 17 different species. Some of them had been killing each other a year ago. Some had been slaves of the Verthani Empire for centuries. Some had never met another intelligent species before the Queen's message reached their isolated worlds. Now they flew together into battle. The Verthani sent their message as Marcus suggested. They had admitted their fear, their mistakes, their 3,000 years of running and conquering. They had told the truth about the silence. They had asked for help. Half the galaxy had responded with anger. Ancient enemies saw the message as a trick. Conquered peoples demanded revenge. Isolationist species sealed their borders and prepared to die alone. Marcus had expected this. Fear was a powerful thing. Verthani had given the galaxy many reasons to fear them, but the other half of the galaxy surprised him. They remembered their own losses. They recognized their own fear in the Queen's words. They looked at the data about the silence and understood that some enemies were too vast to face alone. They made a choice that made no logical sense. They chose hope. The coalition had assembled in 3 months. Ships from species that had been enemies for centuries now flew in formation together. Engineers who had never seen each other's technology worked side by side to create new weapons. Soldiers who had sworn to kill each other trained together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. It was messy. It was difficult. There were fights and arguments and moments when the alliance seemed ready to collapse. But it held together, bound by something stronger than logic or strategy. It held together because everyone involved had decided to believe in something better. Now the silence had arrived. Marcus watched through the bridge view screen as enemy ships filled the void. There were thousands of them, silver shapes moving with perfect coordination, a single mind spread across countless bodies. They blotted out the stars wherever they passed. They moved with the cold patience of a species that had erased hundreds of civilizations. They expected to find the fractured remains of the Verthany Empire. Weak and alone and ready for harvest, they found something else entirely. The Coalition fleet was smaller than the Silence Armada. Its ships were a jumbled mix of different technologies, different designs, different capabilities. By every logical measure, they should have been destroyed in the first minutes of contact. But logic did not account for what happened next. The battle began with fire and fury. Coalition ships rushed to meet the Silence, weapons blazing. The enemy adapted quickly, as they always did. Silver ships twisted and reformed, countering every tactic, every weapon, every strategy. Marcus watched the tactical displays as ships crewed by friends vanished in silent explosions. He watched crews of species that had been strangers months ago, dying together, fighting together, refusing to retreat even when retreat was the only logical option. The Verthani fought like they had never fought before. 3,000 years of fear had taught them to be careful, to preserve their strength, to never take risks that were not calculated. Now they threw themselves at the enemy with abandon, sacrificing ships to protect allies. Taking wounds to create openings for others, General Krixvon led a squadron directly into the heart of the Silence formation. His ship was destroyed, but his sacrifice created a gap that allowed 3 smaller vessels to reach a critical target. His last transmission was a sound Marcus had never heard a Verthani make before. He was singing a battle song from ancient Verthan Prime, before the fear, before the running. A song that had not been sung in 3,000 years. Other Verthani heard it. They began singing too. The battle raged for hours. The Coalition lost ship after ship, but every time a vessel fell, 2 more moved to cover the gap. Species that had been enemies died protecting each other. Crews that had never met before their final moments sacrificed themselves. For strangers, and the Silence paused. It was only a moment. A brief hesitation in their perfect, coordinated assault, but Marcus noticed it. In all their countless years of conquest, the Silence had never encountered anything like this. Civilizations fought them, or fled them, or surrendered to them. They did not choose to die for strangers. They did not sacrifice themselves for beings they had only just met. The Silence did not understand, and for the first time in their existence, that confusion created an opening. Queen Zirthanvik's voice echoed across every frequency, reaching every ship in the Coalition fleet. Her voice was calm and strong, carrying the authority of a ruler who had finally found something worth ruling for. Commander Chen. Marcus gave the order. Every ship in the Coalition activated their faster-than-light drives simultaneously. Not to flee. To create a massive disturbance in the fabric of space itself around the Silence fleet. It was a technique no single species could have developed alone. It required 17 different technologies working in perfect harmony. It required absolute trust that every ship would do its part. It required hope. The disturbance ripped through the Silence Armada. Ships that had never known fear were torn apart by forces they could not adapt to, could not predict, could not survive. The single mind that controlled them screamed across dimensions as it was scattered into fragments, not destroyed. The Coalition did not have the power for that, but broken. Scattered across light years of space, reduced to pieces that would take centuries to reassemble. Centuries the galaxy would use to prepare, to grow stronger, together. In the aftermath, as the battered Coalition fleet limped toward home, Queen Zirthanvix found Marcus standing alone on an observation deck. He was staring at the stars, at the debris field that marked their victory, at the vast darkness where the Silence had been. "I asked you once to teach my people hope," she said, moving to stand beside him. I did not expect you to teach the entire galaxy. Marcus laughed. It was a tired sound, heavy with loss and grief, and something that might have been joy. I did not teach anyone anything. I just reminded them what they already knew, which was that we are all afraid, all fragile, all mortal. He turned to face her, and that is exactly why we need each other. The queen made that low humming sound again. Her laugh, he had learned. When you stumbled into my chamber, I thought you were the most foolish creature I had ever seen. A primitive animal making a meaningless gesture. And now, Queen Zerthanvix placed one massive limb on his shoulder. It was a gesture of respect she had never offered any being outside her own species in her 300-year reign. Now I understand why the universe needed humans. You are small and brief and impossibly stubborn. You make choices that defy logic and call it doing the right thing. You hope when hope is foolish, and love when love is painful, and fight when fighting is pointless. She looked out at the stars, at the ships of 17 species traveling together, scarred but alive, toward a future they would build as one. You are exactly what we needed, she said. Because sometimes the galaxy does not need the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced. Sometimes it needs someone foolish enough to stumble through the wrong door and brave enough to stay. Marcus smiled. So what happens now? Now we rebuild. Now we prepare. Now we prove that this alliance was not just desperation, but the beginning of something new. The queen straightened to her full height. And you, Commander Chen, will help me build it. Not as a prisoner. Not as an advisor. As an equal to a Verthani queen? An equal to a friend. Marcus looked at the alien standing beside him. At the being who had imprisoned him, who had feared him, who had learned from him, who now called him friend. He thought about the impossible journey that had brought him here. From a prison cell to the bridge of a ship that had helped save a galaxy. He thought about hope. And what it could accomplish when people chose to believe in it together. I think I would like that, he said quietly, and together. Human and Verthani, they watched the stars wheel past as the Dawn Alliance carried them toward home. Toward a future that, for the first time in 3,000 years, was not built on fear. It was built on hope.